Not all Pokemon types are created equal, unfortunately. Life is unfair, and some Pokemon types have it much easier than others. Due to the nature of the type system, there is of course a reason to use every single one of these types. They all have their place somewhere, and even the worst type in the game has viable Pokemon that are that type. Typing is just one factor of the many different factors that determine how good a Pokemon is. But at the end of the day, we can still judge each type in a vacuum. If you have one of these types, how happy are you about it? How much is that going to enhance your chances of success? Let's attempt to answer this question today in the context of the Gen 9 OU metagame specifically. Depending on which metagame you're playing, and especially if you're playing doubles, the type chart is going to look totally different. Some types are better than others depending on the format, but I'm talking specifically about Gen 9 OU here. And the value of types also varies from generation to generation. If you're curious about which types are the best and worst in Gen 3 OU, I have a video about that topic too. Let's start at the top, at the peak of the mountain, with the best type in the game, which in my eyes is the Fairy type. There are some other contenders. You could make an argument for some other types, but I think overall, the most consistently good type, the type everything wishes it was, would be Fairy. Fairy is just an immaculate type, offensively and defensively. Fairy is crucially immune to Dragon. That's a big immunity to have. Dragon types are common. Dragon type attacks are big and scary, like Draco Meteor and Outrage, etc. Dragon immunity is incredible. Fairy typing also has very valuable resistances to Fighting, Dark, and Bug, all very commonly used, popular types in competitive. And as for weaknesses, you are only weak to two types, Steel and Poison, which are not the world's most common attacking types. You do see them, of course, but not only are Fairy types just neutrally quite good against a lot of Pokemon, if you are up against a Pokemon with Steel or Poison type attacks, they are easy to cover from teammates. I mean, just running a Steel type of your own is an easy fix. Steel types resist themselves and are immune to Poison, and there are so many types that resist Steel and Poison that can patch up your mono Fairy type's weaknesses. Offensively, Fairy also has access to the excellent Moonblast and 90 power special attack, with a 30% chance to drop the enemy's special attack by one stage. I mean, it's one of the best common stab moves on Fairy types that exists. It's such a good move. And offensively, Fairy hits Dark type super effectively, Fighting type super effectively, and Dragon type super effectively. That's pretty good, hitting 3 popular types for ×2 damage. It's not the best offensive type in the game, but it's pretty damn good considering all your other advantages. So being a Fairy type is usually just really good. If you have a bad type attached to you, like Bug or Ice or something, if you have Fairy as a secondary type, that does a lot of heavy lifting. That takes the weight off your shoulders significantly. Because of how many good resistances you have, the Stab, Moonblast. But there's a very positive correlation with being a Fairy type and being competitively viable. For the second best type in the game, I think I would go with Ghost. I think it's Ghost. Ghost has always been good, ever since Gen 1, for its fantastic 2 immunities to normal type attacks and fighting type attacks. Having a Ghost type on your team deals psychic damage to the enemy. They are afraid to click moves of those types because they could completely thud in the face of a Ghost. Just having a Ghost type on your team is such an asset. It's such an important box to tick oftentimes. I feel like so many competitive teams have at least one Ghost type on them. It's such a common and important trait. And Ghost types have always had the fantastic benefit of blocking Rapid Spin from taking effect, which is massive in competitive singles, and massive in Gen 9 OU when way less things get defog, and Rapid Spin is the most common form of hazard removal. Rapid Spin is of course a normal type attack, so it has no effect on Ghosts. Ghost types are not as defensively sturdy as something like a Fairy type because they are weak to themselves, Ghost, and they're weak to Dark. And it's only 2 weaknesses, but they are very common types. A lot of stuff runs coverage that is Ghost and Dark type. A lot of popular threats are just Ghost and Dark types. So in that sense, I think maybe they're a bit worse than the Fairy type. But if you put Ghost in number 1, I wouldn't necessarily blame you either. Ghost types also happen to be amazing offensively in a kind of unique way, because Ghost is a very spammable type. The only type in the game that resists Ghost is Dark, and although normal types are immune, normal types are not that common in Gen 9 OU. There are barely any that see prominent competitive use, so you can kind of just spam Ghost types and do at least good neutral damage to most of the game. We also hit Psychic and enemy Ghost types super effectively, but the real benefit of Ghost is just how strong it is neutrally. Like a Dragapult clicking Choice Spec Shadow Ball is such a powerful threat because very few things can actually come in on that safely. Ghost also has the hidden benefit of being immune to trapping effects. This doesn't come up that often because most trapping effects are banned in Gen 9 OU, but that could save your life against a Magnet Pull Pokemon. Goldengo, crucially, can't be trapped by Magnet Pull, which is actually a pretty big deal. We might be in a different metagame if you could Magnet Pull Goldengo, but you can't. And maybe the occasional Infestation or Whirlpool or random trapping effect that props up, you're not worried about it if you're a Ghost type. For number 3 type in the game, it's a bit of a tough one, but I personally would go with Steel. Steel types are consistently excellent and competitive. They really always have been. Steel just has so many incredible defensive qualities. It has the most resistances of any type in the game, and that is something that really improves consistency. All those resistances really come in handy constantly. Steel types are also immune to toxic poison and poison in general, and that's massive. That's one of their greatest defensive benefits too. And offensively, Steel got a lot better with the introduction of Fairy. They can at least hit Fairy types for super effective damage, and that comes up quite a bit. That's the most valuable offensive trait. In every generation, there are just a bunch of Steel types in OU, and that's true in Gen 9 as well. King Gambit, Goldengo, Iron Treads. And something I haven't mentioned so far is that all these types I've talked about here in the top tier are common types to terrestrialize into. Defensive terrestrialization is a big thing, and Pokemon often want to become a different type to be better defensively. You see people terrestrialize into Fairy type the most of all of them just because of how good it is with so few weaknesses and all its great defensive qualities. Ghost as well because you can suddenly gain an immunity to incoming hits, and Steel because you resist everything on the planet. That's another common thing to terrestrialize into, and gaining a poison immunity is also huge. And speaking of popular types to terrestrialize into, I think that Water is an S tier type. And it's kind of an interesting one. When you think about water in a vacuum, it doesn't sound that exciting, especially compared to its peers here. Like all these other types have more flashy and obviously powerful traits. Water is simple in how good it is. It's similar to Fairy in the sense that it only has 2 weaknesses to Electric and Grass. It has some nice resistances to Fire, Ice, and itself, and that's about it. Water just happens to be a really good, consistently strong defensive type in every generation that is also easy to have its weaknesses covered. There are so many types you can pair with Water to enhance it. Water makes broken dual type combos all the time. Probably most of the good dual type combos have Water somewhere in there. Water type is also quite good offensively. You hit Fire, Ground, and Rock types for super effective damage. That's 3 really common types that are nice to hit. And Water has the added benefit of benefiting from Rain. Rain isn't that good in Gen 9 OU, unfortunately, so this is less of a significant part of Water type being good, but it's still something to note that they benefit from a popular weather effect. Some might disagree with me on this water placement. They might think some other types below it are better, but honestly, I just feel like I see water types thrive in this metagame all the time. There are so many viable water types, and they are so consistently good, and so many different things terrestrialize water for a free turn because it's just good neutrally against the whole planet, almost. So I feel happy putting water in the S tier. At the top of A+, I think I would put the Dark type. Dark is probably the most popular offensive type in the game. Actually has very similar traits to Ghost, hitting both Psychic and Ghost super effectively, just like Ghost type does. Dark is unfortunately suffering from an extra resistance. It can't hit Fairy types very hard because they resist Dark. But Dark types have perhaps the best attack in the whole game, or at least the best commonly distributed one, and that is Knockoff. Knockoff is such an elite attack that anything with Stab Knockoff is automatically a scary threat, like a Crawdaunt or a Roaring Moon. Dark is a really spammable type, not only because it just hits a lot of stuff neutrally, but Knockoff always gets some progress against things. Even if they're coming in on a resist, they are losing their item, so Knockoff is the most spammable attack in the game, probably, for that reason. Dark types are also decent defensively, decent enough, with a valuable immunity to Psychic. It's not the world's most valuable immunity. Ghost does have better immunities, but that's pretty damn good to have a whole immunity attached to a good offensive type with the best attack in the whole game. The reason I haven't put Dark in the S tier, despite how common it is and prominent it is, I do think Dark suffers from some pretty bad weaknesses to Fairy, Fighting, and Bug. They are manageable and you can, cover them elsewhere, and there are a million reasons to run Dark types anyway. It's not like those weaknesses are keeping you down that much, but these weaknesses are worse than the weaknesses of the types above it, in my opinion, because Fairy types are everywhere in the world. And Bug weakness in particular is really damning because of how common U-turn is, just as a pivoting effect. Being weak to that is tough sometimes. Oh, Dark types also have another good effect attached to them, which is their immunity to Prankster priority moves. If a Pokemon with Prankster uses a status ailment or something against a Dark type, it won't work at all. They're immune to being affected by Prankster support moves. That does come up sometimes. There aren't that many relevant Prankster Pokemon in Gen 9 OU. You might see the occasional Grimmsnarl or something. That's much more relevant in VGC, and it's a reason to terrestrialize into a Dark type actually. But worth noting anyway, it's an extra benefit. As for terrestrializing into a Dark type, you actually do see Special Walls do this sometimes because Dark happens to grant Psychic immunity, which is nice on a Special Wall because Psy Shock is a special attack that hits the enemy in their defensive stat, physical defense, and also Dark typing grants you immunity to the move Stored Power. Psy Shock and Stored Power are two common ways to actually break through Special Walls, so becoming a Dark type has defensive value in that sense. So like Clodsire, you sometimes see Terra Dark. So that's worth noting as well. There is some reason to defensively terrestrialize into a Dark type. Up next is Ground, and now that I'm looking at it, I think I might be underrating the Ground type, possibly. I don't know, it's a tough one. Dark is so good offensively, but a bit worse defensively. Ground, on the other hand, is one of the most common defensive types you see in almost every generation, and that's true in Gen 9 OU as well. You have Great Tusk, Landorus Therian, Garchomp, Gliscor, all these prominent bulky ground types, because Ground has that crucial electric immunity, which is always so valuable. It's a very valuable immunity. It means you can't be Thunder Waved. It means you can't be pivoted on with Volt Switch, or just hit by prominent electric types, like Raging Bolt. Ground has one of the best attacks in the game to its name as well, one of the most consistently powerful ones, that being Earthquake, just a flat 100 power, 100% accurate attack. Earthquake has always been great, and ground typing is outstanding offensively, hitting 5 types super effectively. Fire, Rock, Steel, Poison, and Electric. That's an unbelievable amount of types to hit offensively, especially for a type that is also quite good defensively and has such a crucial defensive role. So ground is fundamentally outstanding. And in fact, now I'm talking myself into it, I'm going to put Ground above Dark. The one downside to ground type offensively is the fact that it suffers from a very common immunity. Flying types are immune to ground, and so are Pokemon with Levitate, who are also quite common. So ground is not as spammable as Dark, and they don't have a move like Knockoff. But still, ground always forms incredible coverage combos like Ground and Ice, Ground and Rock. And most ground types will have a rock move to complement them. And ground rock is just perfect because you hit flying types. If you happen to have ground ice, you're Loving Life too. And guess what? Great Tusk has exactly that. It's got Headlong Rush and Ice Spinner. So I think that I would at least put ground on a similar level to Dark type. You hit more types super effectively, you have a common immunity, but you can easily run coverage to supplement that issue. Speaking of flying, I think I would put the flying type here. Flying is incredibly common in OU formats. You see about 1 million flying types. I feel like people don't think of it as a powerful type that often, but it should have such a status because flying typing is straightforwardly incredible. Flying is immune to ground. That alone is an incredible defensive trait because of what I just said. Without flying types, ground would be perhaps the best type in the game. It's the fact that flying types exist and are so common that keeps ground in check. Flying types are also immune to spikes and toxic spikes, and sticky web. You're immune to most of the hazards in the game, which is incredible passive utility effect to have. That's absolutely outstanding. Flying is also pretty nice offensively and defensively in terms of its resistances and the types it hits. You've got a fighting resistance that comes up pretty often. You got a bug resistance, also great. U-turns everywhere. And you hit a lot of types super effect, fighting, grass, bug. Those are all good types to hit. Bug types aren't the most common thing in the world, but fighting and grass types are relatively common. And you hit a lot of things for good neutral damage, like a good old Stab Hurricane is always a good option. Always feels nice. Up next, I believe that the Poison type is a pretty elite type to have. And that's kind of a crazy thing to say because Poison was once the worst type in the whole game. Back in Gen 1 and also in Gen 3, I would say that Poison was very undesirable, very bad. The main reason for this is that ground and psychic weakness were just a death sentence back then. Everything's running Earthquake, everything's running Psychic. In Gen 3, there's even Dugtrio with Arena Trap and Stab Earthquake. So if you're Poison, you're just literally struggling to exist whatsoever. It was tough. Poison also sucked offensively for a long time. You only hit Grass super effectively for most of your existence in the early gens, and you also thud completely into Steel types. Steel types are immune to Poison type attacks. And Steel types are everywhere. Steel types are the most common type ever, especially back then. So that's truly atrocious for Poison types. Also doesn't help that you are thudding into Ground types. Ground resists Poison. But in Gen 4, Poison types gained some more value with the addition of the Toxic Spikes entry hazard. Not only did many of them get access to this fantastic new support move, they can also remove Toxic Spikes simply by switching onto the field. No other type can do this. No other type can just switch in and get rid of an entry hazard. So that was massive for Poison types in Gen 4. And what was even more massive for Poison types is the introduction of the Fairy type in Gen 6, because not only are Poison types resistant to Fairy, they hit Fairy types super effectively. So Poison types now have a new role as anti-Fairy machines. And the one thing they always did have going for them was an immunity to Poison, the status ailment, and now that feels amplified by all their other advantages they've received over the years. Some of the best defensive Pokemon in Gen 9 OU are Poison types, Slowking Galar being chief among them. Fairy resistance is more important than ever with threats like Iron Valiant running around, and also the rise of Primarina and the ever-presence of Clefable. Getting rid of Toxic Spikes is nice in a world where Glimora exists and all your Pokemon that simply sets Toxic Spikes on the field after getting hit. It's one of the freest ways to make hazards we've ever seen, and having a Poison type is more crucial than ever to get rid of those Toxic Spikes. Poison is also a popular type to terrestrialize into to gain Poison immunity, gain Fairy resistance, gain all these incredible defensive qualities, and that's a mark of a good type if things want to become it with their 1 per game resource. And many Pokemon do want to become Poison type. Ground weakness is still rough, but guess what? You can just run a Flying type or some other levitating Pokemon to patch that up. And your weakness to Psychic isn't that much of a problem anymore. Psychic types are less common in Gen 9 OU. There are some, and you see like Future Sight, Psyshock, those kinds of moves prop up, but often you're not even too worried about those, or you have allies that can assist you. Being Psychic weak is no longer such a death sentence. The Poison type has had probably the biggest glow up of any type in history, from the worst to among the best. That's quite a journey, isn't it? Now we move on to the A tier, and at the top of the A tier I would put the Fire type. Some might think that this type deserves to be a bit higher than this, actually. I wouldn't necessarily think you're crazy if you believe that, but I'll put the Fire type around here. Fire has a lot going for it. Fire types are resistant to Fairy, which is very good. They have Grass and Bug resistance as well as a resistance to themselves. Fire is completely immune to Burn, which is very nice on any physical threat. Can't be burned at all, even from a secondary effect of a move like a Lava Plume. So for that reason, you sometimes see Terra Fire on boost sweepers, not only to enhance the damage of their fire coverage if they have it, but to get a burn immunity and put a bit of a bandage on one of their greatest weaknesses. Fire is also fantastic offensively, crucially hitting the Steel type, one of the big types you want to hit. And that is one of the greatest offensive benefits of Fire typing. You also hit Grass, Bug, and Ice types super effectively. That's a lot of types. That's a lot of types. Fire has always suffered, though, from its unfortunate defensive shortcomings. I mean, Fire is weak to Rock, and any type weak to Rock is going to suffer from the existence of Stealth Rock. It's not so bad now that Heavy Duty Boots exist, but you are more inclined to use that item slot on Heavy Duty Boots, which can feel a bit restrictive. Same goes for Flying types, by the way. I didn't mention that, but Flying types have that problem too. But yeah, there's that. And weaknesses to Ground and Water are also pretty bad. You don't have that many weaknesses, but all of your weaknesses are significant. Ground and Water are such common types. But overall, Fire is quite a good type. Having a status immunity is always very good. And defensively, it's got a lot going for it, actually, especially now that boots exist and you're not dying just for switching on the field to a little pebble. Up next is kind of a tough one between two options. I think I would put Grass type next. I think Grass type is quite good. Grass does suffer from a lot of weaknesses. Grass types are weak to Flying, Poison, Fire, Bug, and Ice. That's a huge issue, especially because some of those are really common types. U-turns everywhere, the bug weakness sucks. Fire and ice are some of the most common coverage moves used on special attackers, so you're under fire from that. But you do have some really good resistances. Grass resists itself, which actually comes in handy a lot. Grass is also resistant to electric, water, and ground. Those are all really common types, and water types and grass types form a fantastic defensive core, because grass happens to resist all the things that water is suffering from. Water is weak to electric and grass resists electric and itself. They're perfect for one another. Water also happens to resist fire and ice, making them an especially good defensive pairing. The fact that grass pairs so well with water type is why I give it a lot of points, because despite all their shortcomings, it can form such a strong core. Grass also has some immunities to speak of. Grass types are immune to Leech Seed. That doesn't come up that often in Gen 9 OU, but it's something. Grass types are also immune to powder-based moves. Unfortunately, that doesn't come up that often in Gen 9 OU either, because sleep moves are banned, so the most relevant powder type move, that being Spore, is just banned anyway, so that's not useful. But occasionally this will come up against Stun Spore, which some Pokemon have. And in VGC, this powder immunity is a lot more relevant because Rage Powder, which is a redirection move, is completely ignored by grass types. Offensively, the grass type is also respectable, hitting ground, rock, and water. And hitting water is especially good. Grass types also have some pretty good attacks to their name and tend to be pretty solid. There's also Grassy Terrain, which boosts the power of grass type attacks. Not every type has a terrain that boosts them. Pokemon like Meowscarada and Rillaboom and even Ogerpon Wellspring are grass types, and they are really good metagame staples. And occasionally you do see Terra Grass to boost the power of grass coverage, which is common, and to gain ground resistance and other such resistances. Up next, I've got the Fighting type. I think the Fighting type is very good. Fighting type attacks are some of the best in the game. Close Combat is a famous one with its high power and pretty wide distribution. Fighting hits Dark, Steel, Rock, Ice, and normal types super effectively. That's a lot of types. So Fighting type is one of the best in the game offensively and very desirable as a coverage type to complement other moves. Unfortunately, Fighting does suffer from the existence of ghosts. Ghost types are immune to Fighting type attacks, but still, it is one of the best offensive types in the game. And hitting Steel in particular, which is one of the big ones you want to hit, that's massive. Fighting types are also not too bad defensively. They have a Psychic weakness, which, as established, isn't that hard to patch up, especially because Dark types exist who are immune. And you're weak to Fairy and Flying. Flying is relatively common as an attacking type, but not that much. The real unfortunate one is Fairy. Being weak to Fairy does suck, and also being resisted by Fairy types does suck. But Fighting types always seem to be good. There's always a few relevant in OU, and in Gen 9 we have Great Tusk, one of the top Pokemon in the game, being a Fighting type, and turns out when you combine two great offensive types together, ground and fighting, you get a pretty elite level offensive stab combination, don't you? Now that I think about it, folks, I would probably say Fighting is a better type than Grass. I think that that's fair. I don't know what I was talking about. Grass is good, but I think Fighting is better. Up next, I think I would put the Electric type, which might look a bit weird. Some of you might think Electric's better than this. I think that Electric has a serious uphill battle against the Ground type, and it always has, because Electric is weak to Ground, and Electric moves have no effect on Ground types. So Electric types, more than any other type, really need coverage to function whatsoever. There are so many Electric types that just suck, because a single Ground type ends their entire career, and they can't do anything. A lot of them do have that coverage they need, and with it they thrive and achieve new heights, but ever since Hidden Power was cut from the game in Gen 8, that has been more and more rough, and a lot of Electric types don't have that privilege. There are some Electric types that have risen to the top of competitive, of course. In Gen 9 OU there is Raging Bolt, who has really stolen this show, but Raging Bolt has big neutral Dragon type attacks to hit ground, so that is what patches that up. Ground types can't come in safely. There's Zapdos as well, but Zapdos has always had the privilege of being an electric flying dual type. So it doesn't matter that much that it struggles into ground types a little bit, because it's immune to ground. And Stab Hurricane is also enough against the common ground types of Gen 9 OU. But what about something like Sandy Shocks, who kind of struggles to exist? It can be used, but it often needs to terrestrialize to be able to hit those ground types. And that's a struggle, isn't it? Electric typing isn't all bad though, of course. Electric types are pretty nice offensively, even though they only hit 2 types super effectively. Those 2 types are very important to hit, and those are water and flying. Flying especially is very good to hit. And one of the best coverage combos in the game is electric and ice, the bolt beam, because the 2 things that electric can't hit, at least neutrally, are ground and grass, and I suppose electric itself. But ice covers all of that. Ice allows you to hit ground type super effectively and grass type super effectively. Electric types also at least only have a single weakness to ground. It's actually a pretty rare trait. They only have 1 weakness. They don't have that many other good resistances to speak of. They're resistant to steel and to themselves. So neutrally they're kind of an awkward type, but they do only have a single weakness, so that's cool. And electric types are also completely immune to being paralyzed. That is one of their best traits. Not only does Thunder Wave and direct paralysis inflicting effects have no impact, it does nothing, but even the secondary effects of attacks like Discharge with a paralysis chance will not affect you. You simply cannot be paralyzed. And that is a reason to terrestrialize into an electric type to gain that immunity. The electric type does have some stuff going for it, but I feel like placing it about here because it always feels like electric has a significant uphill battle and often just feels a bit plain as a typing and needs support from either a really good dual typing or just those key tools to cover its weaknesses. I feel like there are just a bunch of average electric types that can't do anything. That's very common. In the B tier, it looks a little weird, but I think I would put the dragon type, actually. I feel like the dragon type on its own merits is kind of average. Even though a lot of dragon types are really good, and dragon has a lot going for it, with like Draco Meteor being a really strong attack, and it hitting a lot of things for neutral damage, which has its value, like in the Raging Bolt example I just mentioned. But still, I think the dragon seriously suffers from the fact that fairy types are completely immune to dragon type attacks. You're also weak to fairy and weak to ice. The best dragon types in the game all have uniquely good move pools or other traits or secondary typings that push them over the edge, but if you think about it, there are a lot of dragon types that really struggle to do anything. Think about the most prime example of this is probably Regidrago, who is just a mono dragon type with very little in the way of complementary coverage options, and Regidrago just can't do anything oftentimes because it folds in the face of a single fairy type, and fairy is the most common type in the whole game. It's not all bad being a dragon type. They have some great resistances to fire, water, grass, and electric, so there's plenty of entry points to hit the field if you're a dragon type. You can often invite attacks of those types and get an entry point on your Dragapult or something, but your Dragapult is an example of a particularly excellent Pokemon that I think thrives because of traits other than its dragon typing, personally. I don't think the dragon typing is doing the heavy lifting there, whereas a type like fairy is often a huge part of the reason a Pokemon is good. That's just my opinion. Now we're down to the very worst types in the game, the bottom of the barrel, and in the top of this C tier, I think I would put the rock type. Rock has always had a tough existence because rock types are really weird and defensive. They resist fire and they resist normal, and that's about it. And they are weak to the entire planet. They're weak to fighting, water, ground, steel, and all those types are terrible to be weak to. I guess steel is not the worst thing to be weak to, but water, ground, and fighting are so common. You are under fire from those types constantly. And being weak to such common types without that many resistances to speak of is quite damning. Rock types do have the incredible benefit of being outstanding offensively though. Rock super effectively threatens flying, ice, fire, and bug. So having rock typing is offensively beneficial for that stab damage on one of the better offensive types in the game. Usually you'd rather just have rock coverage though, and you don't want to be a rock type. You'd rather have the benefits of that offensive coverage without suffering from all the drawbacks of rock typing. There are some rocks in Gen 9 OU. There's Glimmora, who is very good, but Glimmora is a Pokemon that's aiming to die pretty quickly. It's an aggressive hazard stacker Pokemon. Sometimes it's used with the, Power Herb sets for that special attack boost, or Scarf sets for some more aggression, but it's like a fast-ish offensive Pokemon slash expendable hazard setter, so its rock typing being bad doesn't keep it down that much because it has tools to get significant value in its short lifespan. There's also Garganical, who is really doing the heavy lifting in every other area besides its rock typing. Rock typing is the worst thing about this thing. It's the ability that grants complete status immunity and an extra ghost resistance, plus outstanding stats, access to Salt Cure, access to recovery, access to everything in the world. All of that is the reason Garganicle's good. Rock typing is, if anything, something to keep it from being too powerful, because at least its typing is not the best. And Garganicle is one of the Pokemon that chooses to defensively terrestrialize most often because of how bad its mono rock typing is. It can still function defensively because of all of its great tools, but it really wishes it was not a rock type. Rock types do have the hidden benefit of receiving a special defense boost in the sand, which can be kind of cool, but how often does that really come up in Gen 9 OU? There's no permanent weather, and there hasn't been for a long time, and the sandstorm setters are really perhaps at their worst. Tyranitar is UU now. I don't see the Hippo anymore ever. Who's running sand teams in Gen 9 OU? They're very niche at best, and even at their peak, I mean, the rock special defense boost wasn't really the main reason to run a sand team or anything, and even with that special defense boost, you would find rock types suffering defensively anyway. Often was not enough to justify being a rock type. It was a nice bonus, but hardly a significant advantage. So rock types still feel rough in Gen 9 OU, but they do have the benefit of their fantastic offensive nature and some functional Pokemon to their name. So I'd give them some credit for that, but they're of course at the lower end of the tier list here. Up next is Psychic, which is interesting. Would Psychic be worse than Rock or better? I think that Psychic is worse than Rock because even though Rock is suffering from all those weaknesses, Psychic's weaknesses are even worse. Because Psychic is weak to Ghost, Dark, and Bug. Talk about the worst weaknesses you can have in the world. I've spoken so much in this video about how common those three types are, because Bug happens to be the type that U-turn is, and U-turn is just everywhere. It's a staple of the game. It's just a pivoting move. It's fundamental. So you're just catching strays with your sheer existence as a Psychic type, getting hit by a mere pivoting move. And Ghost and Dark weakness is just devastating because those types are everywhere. They're not even aiming to hit things super effectively. That's not their purpose. Their purpose is to hit a bunch of things neutrally and just be spammed. So being weak to those types, they're often not even trying to hit you, but then you're just getting hit by them anyway. There are quite a few Psychic types ranked in OU, so it seems a bit weird to say this type is this bad, but being a Psychic type feels actively detrimental in Gen 9 OU. It feels completely devastating. And often all of those Psychic types are a dual type Pokemon, and their Psychic typing is like a way to keep them balanced, or it's actively their worst trait. Like Hatterene. Imagine if Hatterene was just a mono fairy type, it would probably be way better. Psychic typing is holding it down. Offensively, Psychic is also not that fantastic because Dark types are common, and guess what? They're immune to your stab moves. That's no good. Psychic, as I mentioned earlier, does have some good attacks like Stored Power and Psyshock, which do have unique effects that are useful, but you don't need to be a Psychic type to use those effectively. Especially Stored Power. At that point, the stab boost of Stored Power is not really that relevant if you've boosted enough for it to be strong and sweep the game at that point, so that's unnecessary. You also have Future Sight, and Stab Future Sight is actually quite a good one. Stab Future Sight can have some real breaking power, but even that, I mean, Dark types can thwart that if they maneuver correctly, so I feel like being a Psychic type is dreadful. Even more dreadful than being a Rock type, amazingly, because at least Rock has a really good stab. Rock stab actually has some value. It's like why use Iron Boulder or something, or Glamora. Like their Rock stab is really strong, but Psychic stab is not even that great. And all those defensive shortcomings just suck to such an extent. And now we are at the bottom of the barrel, the bottom three types in the game, the D tier here. And surprisingly for some, I'm going to go ahead and put the Ice type at the top of the D tier. I don't think Ice type is the worst in the game in Gen 9. Now don't get me wrong, Ice typing is atrocious, but I think that Ice typing at least has some benefit going for it. Ice typing is famously dreadful defensive. Ice types are weak to Fire, Rock, Fighting, and Steel. Rock weakness is always terrible because Stealth Rock exists. Yes, there are boots, but that's restrictive, as we mentioned earlier. And on top of suffering from all those weaknesses, you have no defensive value whatsoever. Ice is only resistant to itself. It has no other resistances. So Ice is under fire from neutral damage from any type in the world. Even if it's not weak to it, it's probably hitting it really hard because it's got no damn resistances. So being an Ice type is an automatic debuff. Ice types struggle to switch onto the field, do anything, achieve any sort of value. But Ice type does have the benefit of being maybe the best offensive type in the game. Ice coverage is probably the most common coverage type in the game. If you have an ice move that's half decent, you're probably going to use it, because ice happens to threaten 4 important types: ground, flying, grass, and dragon. And ice complements so many other offensive types. I've talked about, multiple types that work well together offensively. Ice complements the most other offensive types. Like, you got electric ice, ground ice, fire ice, grass ice, all of these coverage combos enhanced by ice as an option. And ice types can often be really broken just because of how good they are offensively. You have the Baxcalibur, Chien Pao, Iron Bundle. Those are just some Gen 9 examples, but there have been previous ones like Galarian Darmanitan. Uber's level threats that are ice types. Despite how terrible ice type seems, it's a very skewed type. It's often said that ice types are either absurdly broken or completely horrendous, with little in between. That's pretty true, because ice type is so good offensively that if a Pokemon is strong enough in terms of its speed and direct offensive power, it's probably going to do really well if it's an ice type. Ice Stab is very valuable. But still, the majority of ice types do suck, and being an ice type is the worst defensive trait you can have, arguably. So despite its other advantages, there is all that. There is also a small defensive advantage to being an ice type. Well, there's 2 actually. The first is an immunity to freeze, which may not seem like it's that important and often doesn't come up, but it can be nice to just know that you can't get frozen. That is a good sense of security. That was a more relevant trait in older generations of Pokemon, but it is still a very good security measure to just know you can't be frozen. And also, in the new snow weather effect, ice types gain a 1.5x defense boost, which is actually kind of good. Especially because Chilly Reception is a reliable move that pivots and sets snow at the same time, so you can pivot to an ice type, and that defense boost will come up relatively often. There's also like Alola Ninetales, who is an ice type that sets snow on the field itself and gets a direct benefit from that defense boost immediately because it itself is an ice type. The defense boost isn't going to help you that much because of how many common physical attacking types you're weak to anyway, but it's still quite a good trait and something that does sometimes make a difference. Up next we have the normal type. Normal type is this down low. Normal type feels really atrocious in Gen 9, which is kind of funny because back in Gen 1 it was perhaps the best type in the game. How the mighty have fallen. The only OU ranked normal type at the moment is Blissey, and I feel like Blissey doesn't count because Blissey is, the special wall. It's not viable because it's a normal type, it's viable because it has 3000 special defense. Beyond Blissey, it's really tough being a normal type. Normal type has 0 resistances. And as I mentioned with electric and ice, having 0 resistances is really rough. In fact, even ice type has 1 resistance, to itself at least. Normal type does have a ghost immunity, perhaps its best defensive trait, but it's very common for ghosts to run fighting coverage or just have other options to threaten you significantly, like Goldingo's Make It Rain or something. Normal types also have 1 weakness to fighting, and to have 1 weakness, that's a pretty bad one to have. Fighting types are everywhere. Fighting type attacks are everywhere. There just aren't many viable normal types because being a normal type doesn't provide much value. Offensively, normal is also atrocious. It hits nothing super effectively. It is resisted by rock and steel, and ghosts are immune to it. Why would you ever use normal type attacks unless they're broken like Population Bomb or something? But Population Bomb is just used because it's a 10-hit move boosted by Technician, not because it's normal type. It wishes it was Fairy type or something. I don't know if people think of normal type as being worse than Ice. Ice has the reputation of being the worst type in the game, but there are some Ice types that are good. There are some ice types that are relevant because of their ice typing primarily. Blissey is not really good because of its normal typing. Normal typing fits well on it because it's just a blob of stats, but having no resistances, no good defensive qualities, no good offensive qualities. It is a death sentence. It truly is. But of course, there's one type worse than that. I don't think anyone would really disagree. At the bottom, I've got the bug type. The bug type is the roughest type in competitive Pokemon. It's always had a tough existence, and it kind of makes sense. You're supposed to be a little bug. You're not supposed to be very powerful, are you? You're a little ant that I could crush under my foot. But it's still a bit sad, isn't it? It's still a bit sad. Bug types suffer from 3 weaknesses to fire, flying, and rock. Rock weakness being the worst. Bug types also have some okay resistances to ground, fighting, and grass. Those are pretty solid resistances. I think the worst thing about bug types is the fact that so many things resist bug. Sometimes it feels like everything resists bug. Fire, fighting, poison, flying, ghost, steel, and fairy all resist bug. That is an unbelievable 7 types that resist bug. So bug types just feel incredibly underwhelming, don't they? Offensively, they struggle because so many things resist them. They're not spammable. Defensively, they're not the worst thing in the world, I guess. They're better than ice types, but at least ice types are offensively good. Bug has a terrible combination of pretty bad defensive and offensive traits, making it very undesirable as a typing and usually leading to poor viability. There is only one OU ranked bug type in Gen 9 and it's Araquanid, and it's only viable because it has sticky web. And that's pretty much the only reason any bug type is ever viable these days, is because they can use sticky web and nothing else can. If it wasn't for sticky web, I think bug types would be obsolete completely. Araquanid certainly wouldn't be used. Bug can form good dual type combos like bug fighting and bug steel. Unfortunately, the bug steel and bug fighting types of this gen don't feel particularly fantastic. There's Scizor really falling down. Slitherwing is decent, but feels a bit outclassed by Great Tusk. I think that even being a normal type is more desirable than being a bug type, because at least you have that ghost immunity. Ghost immunity is something, and you're at least neutral to more things. Bug typing just struggles to find any purpose for itself. There are some abilities that can enhance being a bug type, like there was once a Ceruledge set where it would Terra Bug, and thanks to Flash Fire, it was actually a good defensive typing because the fire weakness wasn't there anymore. That's okay. Low Kicks is also a very functional offensive bug type because of the ability Tinted Lens, which deals double damage to resistances. That means that bug getting resisted by half the damn type chart doesn't matter because you deal the same damage anyway because it cancels out. So low kicks can function for that reason. Bug also has some good attacks to its name, mostly U-turn, which I've referenced a million times in this video. Stab U-turn can be good, just because the pivoting effect is so powerful. And bug types also have first impression, which is a really, really good priority move with 90 power. It only works on the first turn, but it's still an outstanding attack with priority on it. Priority moves are often not that strong. But in general, it feels like bug is the worst type you can have in Pokemon. And not a single Pokemon is viable because of its bug typing. It feels like it's an active detriment. Or there's some ability like Tinted Lens that cancels out half the disadvantages of being bug. And then that feels like the ability is doing all the heavy lifting, not the typing. Bug has some advantages, but it's mostly disadvantages. And that would be my type chart for Gen 9 OU folks. There it is. What do you think? Do you agree or disagree with my opinions? I did change my mind on a couple things mid-video, and there are a few ones that are a little dubious to me. I could shift them around, but for the most part, at a glance, I think I'm happy with this ranking. What do you think though, and what is your favorite type in Pokemon? Mine is the fire type. I'm a fire type fan, but what about you? Let me know down below in the comments, and thank you for watching.